Good evening and welcome to our webinar this evening. It's a very important topic we'll be discussing: the intersection of race, criminal justice, its societal impacts, and especially its impacts on women. I'm Michael Dard, I'm your host for tonight, and I'm really happy to create this space for us to have this conversation and this dialogue. But I'm obviously super happy to be joined by the inspirational leaders of A New Way of Life. And let me introduce everybody who's here. First of all, for those of you who don't know Susan Burton, Susan is the founder of A New Way of Life Reentry project. It's an organization in South Los Angeles that provides housing, employment assistance, legal services, and leadership development to women who are rebuilding their lives after incarceration. Having cycled herself in and out of prison for nearly 2 decades after the tragic death of her 5-year-old son led to drug addiction, Susan believes that if women have access to support and resources, they can thrive. They don't have to go to prison, they don't have to cycle through prison. Based on that vision and that understanding, in 1998, she's founded A New Way of Life. A New Way of Life provided housing and hope to more than 1,200 formerly incarcerated women. It's helped reunite over 400 women with their children. The organization's reentry legal clinics provided pro bono legal services to more than 3,000 community members with conviction histories. And her book, Becoming Miss Burton, and I have a copy here, is a phenomenal book which catalogs her story, her inspirational life. And I want to encourage everybody to get a copy and to read it. Just today we're going to be covering some of the high spots, but there's no way you can really get into the depth of the journey and the contribution that Susan's made. That book, by the way, has been sent to 18,000 incarcerated women, providing them with hope and a way to think about their lives differently. And today, A New Way of Life currently runs 9 safe homes in the Los Angeles area and is getting set to open a 10th in Montebello. It also supports 16 homes across the country. It's gone international. It's in Uganda now, providing safe housing. Susan herself has won many, many awards. To highlight just a few, she's a CNN Top 10 hero. She received the prestigious Citizen Activist Award from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And in 2015, on the 50th anniversary of Selma and the Voting Rights Act, Susan was named by the Los Angeles Times as one of the new civil rights leaders in the nation. So it's a great pleasure to see you again, Susan, here and to have this time.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Michael, and all of the attendees on the webinar. Thank you for hosting this. I'm just honored to be here.
Well, that's great. Let me introduce now Ingrid. Ingrid Archie's exposure to extreme violence in her home paved a direct pathway as a young child to the foster care system. Her attempts to cope with the physical and emotional trauma were criminalized, and Ingrid spent most of her young life behind bars, revolving in and out of juvenile detention centers and later prison. Later on, Ingrid faced charges that temporarily removed her children from her, landing them in the foster care system. Hoping to improve her circumstances, she actually entered A New Way of Life Reentry project as a resident. Through her hard work and with the organization's guidance, Ingrid was able to regain full custody of her children. She now works for A New Way of Life, advocating for formerly incarcerated individuals. She also has the distinction of being the first person to have the state of California petition to have a reclassification for her conviction under Prop 64, which legalized cannabis in 2016. She also benefited from Prop 47 that removed felony for folks, felonies. And she's now A New Way of Life's public face for the law. Ingrid, it's great to see you here as well.
Thank you. It's great to be here as well. I kind of don't know what to say. I'm just happy to be here and to lend whatever, knowledge and experience that people, want to hear about, so that they understand more about, the fight that we've been entrenched in and what we have up against in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great. It's great to be here. I know we're going to dig deep into your stories and what we can do. Finally, I'd like to introduce Sydney Reese, the Employment Social Enterprise Associate at A New Way of Life, social activist, Buddhist teacher, and a poet. And Sydney's going to share with us some of her poetry towards the end of this session here as well.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to see you. Now, the stories that we're going to share today, I think, are especially powerful, and they're powerful on so many dimensions. But one of the reasons why I think they're so powerful is that they connect what is happening in our society at a macro level with individuals' lives. So you can make a direct connection between a lot of policies that are made, between a lot of things that happen in our society, and directly how that impacts somebody, how they go through the prison industrial complex, the rollover into the workplace. In a recent article, The Economist basically said that America suffers from two types of racism. One contains all the myriad injustices that still blights African American lives. The other is the way that factions on the right exploit that racial division as a political tool. Now, what struck me from this article was the absolute imperative that I think all of us have in combating both types of racism is to get a deep understanding of the nature of it as best we can, and really try to understand that, and to understand the experiences of people who are facing it on a day-to-day basis. I first heard about A New Way of Life approximately 3 years ago, as I was actually exploring for myself the issues of race in America. And hearing the stories of formerly incarcerated women, I really feel moved to help share their stories and to help understand it more deeply for myself, but also to enable many others to have an opportunity to learn about their circumstances and what is happening in our society. So if you're like me, you probably are dismayed at the current events that are taking place in our society. And you probably have at least two goals from our session. The first, for me, really is one of education. I want to gain a deeper understanding of how race, the lack of economic resources, our current criminal justice system operates, and how it's creating an incredible level of trauma for people who churn through America's prison system. The second goal I have is to make a difference. And I hope many of you today will feel so inclined as well. We'll be offering an opportunity to make a contribution. If you want to get engaged and volunteer, if you want to offer some services, there'll be opportunities to do that as well. During the course of the session, if you want to make a donation, you can text 44321, we can probably put that up now, text #FreedomWork, and then you'll be able to be directly linked to A New Way of Life's website to make a potential donation. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize as well, we want to make this, if possible, interactive and fluid. So we've enabled the chat box and chat function. So if you have comments, if you have questions, if you want to let us know you've made a donation, you can do it in the chat box, and I'll do my best to make sure that I'm in the flow of everything that's going on there as well. So to start our session, I'd like to have a conversation with Susan. We're really going to aim to cover three broad topics: Susan's incredible personal story, inspirational life, what she's accomplished. Secondly, put it in the context of what's happening in the criminal justice system today, how it's functioning, discuss the topic, the important topic of mass incarceration that's in America today, and especially the impact that it's having on so many women. And then finally, I want to discuss with you, Susan, if I can, where A New Way of Life is today, what it needs to fulfill its vision, where you see the organization going. So it's great to be here with you, Susan, as always. So
Yeah, it's wonderful.
So if I may, I'd like to start, if I can, just take us way, way back. I loved your book, and in reading your book, you mentioned that your family had moved west, as many African-American families had in the 40s and 50s, part of the Great Migration, to get away from the Jim Crow policies in the Deep South. But I was struck as you described it in the chapter, sort of the land of opportunity in California, really in many ways had very similar obstacles and challenges. One of the facts that you point out that in Los Angeles at that time, only 5% of the residential areas were open for Black people to actually live in. So I'd love to start and there, if I may, and get a sense from you what it was like growing up in that time period, and how has that impacted you?
Yeah, so my mom and dad, they fled the South, you know, thinking California, coming to California as the land of opportunity. And where they landed was in the housing projects of Aliso Village. So there had been created these communities that were created to hold all these people that were coming, that were migrating out of the South, out of Jim Crow, out of racism, out of lynching, out of all of the things that that was a terror for their lives. But they landed in these housing projects that were created to really just redline and have all these people in this area. And in those projects, there was just so much that went on and so much that happened, so much that I experienced that no little girl should ever have to experience. You know, I used to think, why didn't my mother and father buy a house and all of these different things? But you couldn't buy a house as a Black person. You weren't able to acquire real estate. It was forbidden. So we lived in the projects, and you know, I navigated the trauma and the harm and the violence of those projects.
Mm. And it seems as though during that whole time period, obviously you faced many, many challenges because of some of the structural forces that you mentioned. But I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about probably the pivotal event that occurred for you, which was the tragic death of your son, and how that occurred. And obviously it set a cycle for you of addiction, incarceration, and really coming to terms with that circumstance.
Yeah, you know, I held on as I wrote the book, as I wrote my book, and I relived all of the trauma and pain and harm that I had endured. That moment, that day that my son was killed by an LAPD detective, my body just could not hold anymore. I didn't know what to do with the grief. It was a law enforcement officer, and law enforcement supposed to be working and there for the community. But this detective never even got out of his car. He left my son laying in the street and drove off. And the rage and the pain and the hurt, the disappointment. You know, my son, his name was KK. He was a 5-year-old rambunctious little boy running around. And, you know, the last thing he did was brought me a chrysanthemum that was full of ants. And that's one of the memories I hold on for him. But I couldn't hold the pain, so I tried to drown it. I began to drink. I drank alcoholically. The drinking escalated to drug use. You know, there was this time when crack cocaine just poured into our communities. It saturated our communities. There was no place for grief counseling for me to go. There was no therapy that I even knew of. And so I drank, and then it escalated to drug use. The cocaine, the crack was on every corner. And for an instant, I was able to escape the pain and the grief, so I used it. I became addicted, and I became imprisoned for using it. And for the next 20 years, I was in a cycle of incarceration. I was in a cycle of despair. And it seemed like it would never, ever end. I just didn't know what to do with it. And who would know what to do with something like that? You know, I was a poor Black woman living in South LA. A policeman had killed my son and he never even said, "I'm sorry." So, you know, fortunately, luckily, after multiple prison sentences, I found a treatment center in Santa Monica by the beach. And there I was able to find recovery. I was able to begin to heal. And I was able to see another way that communities addressed drug addiction. And it was not with chains. It was not with incarceration. It was not with, you know, criminalization. It was with treatment. It was with medicine. It was with compassion. It was with empathy. And I thought, didn't my life matter? Why was I not offered help? I remember in one courtroom one day, I pled to the judge to give me help. I pled to the DA, to all the court, and there was no help for me. I was handcuffed, and I was chained, and I was locked away. But thank God for Santa Monica. Thank God I got lucky enough to find that place and discover something different.
I think one of the things which is just so hard to some understand is this is a healthcare issue. This is a crisis of healthcare for you in your circumstances, and yet it became part of the prison industrial complex, and not having any resources for support and not having that access. It's very hard. I can't imagine what you went through, but just the fact that we as a society seem to be criminalizing this so much it's hard to fathom.
Yeah. I mean, when we think of societal ills, and we go directly to punishment, instead of looking beneath the surface to figure out what do we do to repair. I mean, every time I left prison, I was worse than the day I went in. Every time I left prison, I was a little more hopeless and a little more desperate. To try to find myself. I knew inside of me, I knew something was there. You know, I knew that there was more to me than this, but how do I find it? So that's what I do at A New Way of Life. I support women to find that's in them.
If I can, one thing which I'd love your perspective on, because I think it had and is having a profound impact on how people are treated. But when you see policies like the war on drugs, and how, like in your circumstances, you mentioned crack cocaine was everywhere.
Yeah.
We then at that time had a policy decision of the war on drugs.
Yes.
That had disparate penalties for crack cocaine versus regular cocaine usage, and obviously has had a profound impact on so many families. Yeah. And I don't know if that's well understood, the connection between these, what sounds like a good thing, a war on drugs, and then how it plays out and manifests itself in everyday life.
So the war on drugs was a war on people. It was a war on poor people. It was a war on Black people. It was a war on, poor communities. It was definitely a war on women. during what they call the war on drugs, the rate of incarceration for women went up over 800%. Now, women are the fastest growing segment of the criminal justice system. And, you know, it just astounds me that the U.S., America could pull this off. I mean, we have such a costly criminal justice system that we underfund schools, we underfund social services, we underfund housing, and we overfund prisons and law enforcement and institutions. It's, you know, how did they pull that off? Well, I know how they pulled it off. It's the rhetoric that came out of the different administrations over the past couple of decades. I read the book by Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow. And it walks you through step by step what happened in our country during that time span. And, you know, when I read that book, you know, I had already done a lot of forgiveness work, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of the police, forgiveness of all the things that had happened to me. But when I read that book, it took me to a deeper level of forgiveness for me, because I realized how trapped and how manipulated our country had become through the get tough on crime, the war on drugs, which was a war on communities and a war on people.
Yeah. It's, again, for somebody like me who's, you know, looking at this, exploring, seeking to understand, I find it incredible that we will spend, and you and I have talked about this, $60,000 to $100,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. You could have got 5 Yale degrees as you know, for the cost.
Yeah.
And yet when they actually leave prison, I think it's $100, I don't know if it's changed much since then, and a bus ticket to a Greyhound station in downtown LA, and nothing. I mean,
nothing.
The best business schools in the world have career counseling and help people who know how to function and haven't been locked away in the system, from the system for so long, and they get the resources, and you're on a bus with nothing.
And people might think, well, why do they keep going back? Why do they keep doing that?
Yeah.
There's no opening. I mean, I left prison with $200. I buy a bus ticket for $40. I get off a bus downtown. I have no ID. I have no Social Security. I have no housing. I've just been traumatized by being incarcerated. And I've just been given back every choice where I haven't had a choice for a year or two. And it's overwhelming, and I'm unprepared. And, you know, nobody wants to receive you because you're a convicted felon. I mean, it's daunting. And again, you know, when I got that support and help out in Santa Monica, I found a different way. And what I wanted to do is to replicate it. Michael, what I realized is that was I lay in the bed recovering and working through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I realized that I could not take back the years of pain and suffering that I had suffered, and I could not bring my son back, but I could help another woman, you know, cut her pain and suffering short. I could help her get her baby back. And Ingrid's that's here, you know, I had the pleasure of working with her and holding systems accountable to return her baby. So I get I get to live with her through her children.
Yeah.
And she was over here yesterday, and I was telling her little girl Sky, I hadn't seen her in such a long time, and why doesn't she come visit me more? Yes.
Ingrid, if I may then just use that transition, if you'd like to share a little bit about your story and circumstances, and again, the interaction with the criminal justice system and how now you've managed to, to work your life to where you are today.
So thank you for that. A little bit of background information. You basically read it off in the beginning. I grew up in a really violent household. I grew up during the war on drugs in the early 80s. So I saw a lot. I witnessed a lot that I should not have. And my mom was an alcoholic, and she used her alcoholism to kind of take it out on her children. And so because of that, I was removed out of her care and placed into the DCFS system. It went from the DCFS system to me being criminalized because I kept running away from the group homes. And I received, I think, my first conviction as a person who maintained an immoral life. And so I went to jail for that charge. Not because I actually committed a crime, but because I wouldn't stay in the foster homes, which led, to me going to juvenile hall, placement after placement. And never, not one time was the trauma that I had been through from the separation of my mom or from me being in the household ever addressed. And so it went from the juvenile justice system to the county jail to the prison system. Once I got into the prison system for the first time when I came home, that is when I met Susan Burton for the first time, and she kind of introduced me to just a completely different way of living that I just wasn't used to. As a person who runs, transitional housing, you don't see the person who actually runs it. You just see the staff. So just in my interaction with her, she was extremely hands-on, always in the morning meetings, always checking in on everybody individually and making sure that you were on track with whatever it is that you were doing. And, just basically giving us the opportunity to be accountable for our lives and showing up every day for ourselves, and going to work, making our bed, cleaning our room, being responsible for chores in the house. And she introduced me to critical resistance, which was these people who just wanted to take down the prison industrial complex, and of course there was no funding. It was just people who just wanted to see something different. And through her vision and her hard work, she introduced me to me knowing that I had a voice somewhere. And so I eventually moved on to successfully get into my own apartment from a new way of life and get a job. I was laid off from that job. And because I was laid off from that job for a felony conviction, because they decided to change their laws, that kind of left me in limbo in how to provide for my family. So I entered back into the criminal justice system again in 2014. It was in 2014 when I went to prison. My kids were removed from me. As you read in the book, for me leaving my baby in the car, and which was the direct result of me going through postpartum depression, being in an abusive relationship, not having any type of support from the community anywhere, me being told that I couldn't get childcare because I had a felony, me asking and begging for help, but being said, well, because you have this felony, we can't help you and there's nothing that we could do. And so the end result, was just, the incident where I left my child in the car because I just was so overwhelmed with taking him into the store, and I just wanted to run into the store and run out. I was criminalized for that, on top of the trauma that I was already experiencing. I went to prison again because of Prop 47, the law that you mentioned, I was able to find relief and have my sentence cut short and come home. I came back to Susan Burton again. Came and she swooped up downtown LA and was yelling my name. I said, that sounds like somebody I know. And I mean, the biggest part about it is that she didn't judge. You know, I got in the car, she like, what happened? And I told her what happened. And instead of her coming down with harsh judgments, it was more like, you always have support. I understand that things happen, you know, in the event that, you know, don't leave your support system ever again. You always have a support system here. And it was just like a sigh of relief that came over me. And she was like, now let's get to work, you know, back to that Susan Burton, let's go. And we got to work, and I went through so much. 30 days out of prison, my daughter was molested while I was in prison, and I found out she was pregnant because of that. And all in one day, you know, and that it was a family member who did it, and so on and so forth. And it was just so much that was compounded on me in that day. And I don't think that I would have been able to come out of that situation unless Susan Burton was right by my side. And just, you know, talking to me and telling me, you know, we got you. She came down to the hospital, and she still helped me to walk through that situation and still put my life together. And a lot of times, you know, your life could fall apart because of that, because you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. You go into court trying to fight for your kids, and you have all these fingers being pointed at you. You don't understand a lot of the language that's being said. You don't understand what rights you have or don't have. You may not have the necessary documents you need to get around to all these visits. And A New Way of Life provided everything from counseling to just the wraparound support that I really needed for me to be successful, for me to kind of break that cycle that would have happened if I didn't have that support, and for my daughter, you know, to come out of the situation supported and successful as well, and a beautiful, healthy grandbaby. Yeah, Susan Burton, the hero.
Ingrid, that's incredible story, and what you're doing is inspirational. And I want to take this opportunity then to encourage people who may be so inclined, who want to make a donation. Again, if the link,
and get it together.
Yeah.
Crying.
Yeah, you got me crying, girl.
I also want to thank the folks at AT Kearney who are matching. If there's any employees from AT Kearney on this, any donations will be matched by the company as long as you note it that it's going to A New Way of Life. So you can double your impact there as well. Susan, as you've obviously spent a lot of time reflecting on this, and obviously you've become really involved in activism and trying to work with the system. For a lot of people who don't understand, when they hear we need criminal justice reform, what, you know, it's obvious we're treating a lot of cases, and you make it clear in your book, where you know, I think sort of like, you know, about 80% of people actually don't even go to trial. That is very disproportionate in terms of the outcome from different groups, etc. You know, in terms of the criminal system, the amount of time they get in prison. You mentioned that you know, women who commit a violent crime get sentences that are significantly longer than men. People of color get significantly longer sentences. Is there a way of crystallizing right now what you think are the critical things that need to change in the criminal justice system that, you know, people should be aware of and getting more information and reflecting on?
You know, so 80% of the people who are incarcerated don't really pose a threat to safety. So we could have communities that share safety. We could have an approach of shared safety. We could have an approach like I saw in Santa Monica, where there are support and services that support people to walk through different situations that they encounter. I mean, like victim services before Ingrid, before I was ever criminalized, we were victims. We were victimized over and over and over again. How do we access resources in a way that would allow us to heal? I mean, the criminal justice system can't be used to solve social problems when they don't solve it. We just have to rethink how we respond. I mean, mental health. People with mental health problems should not be caged and criminalized because they're ill, and that's a big part of what happens. Mothers and children separated, and the children the children want to be with their moms. They want to be loved. They want to have family. So, we need to really, really look at how we significantly dismantle a system of punishment. And that's what all of our criminal justice, all of our prisons and all of our jails are. It's about punishment. Even those that we need to put somewhere because we're not safe, we need to be looking at the rehabilitation of those individuals, not aggregating their symptoms, and that's what happens there. People come out, as I said, I was convicted of a drug offense over and over and over again. I never got treatment there. And each time I left, I was a little bit more hopeless and a little bit more desperate. And thank God I had that flicker of hope when I reached Santa Monica that allowed me to get on the path of healing and recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And people may not realize that the incarcerated right now in the United States is 2.2 million people. It's been growing at an extraordinarily fast rate. And with the pandemic and with COVID, it's created a whole series of additional problems. I mean, what are you facing there, and how is that impacting the work and the lives of everybody?
Oh my God. I just think about the pandemic inside of prisons and institutions and all over America. The prison systems and the jail systems, coronavirus is just multiplying and taking people out. You have no way to social distance. You have no way to go to a medical provider of choice. And the medical system is really crappy there. Mm-hmm. And it's really a hopeless, hard situation. And I've been advocating really, really hard in California, in Los Angeles County, for the release of women from jails and the release from women from prisons. I actually opened a new house during the pandemic. April 3rd, I opened a new house because the governor was saying, we can't release people to the street. Okay, well, I'll do my part. I'm fixing to put up another house. And we got that house up and going, and it filled up. And as a result, the St. Vincent de Paul Society saw that we opened a house during the pandemic, and they offered us a convent. Can you imagine that? So we're in the process of trying to remodel that convent and get it open. Mm-hmm. And Michael, I don't have any, dedicated resources that I could just take that convent and I have all the staffing and all the resource, all what I need. But I know that I've been put in a position that if I go out there and I take the risk, and we have to take risk. If we want change, we must take risks.
Right.
And just day by day, we're putting it together. I had a flooring company that donated the flooring to us to put down in the convent. So far we got a floor. And it's piece by piece. No guarantees, but
when does the convent, when will you be putting residents in there, going to, if everything goes to plan?
well, we're hoping mid-August we can open it up. We need to, so the convent was a little sparse and a little dark.
Yeah.
And we want a place that is hopeful and motivational and has color and inspiring and has, a computer center, educational center, a nice yard. So yeah, we want to inspire people to be the best that they can be.
Mm-hmm. And you and I chatted about things that you really need. You mentioned marketing support, digital support, as well as obviously donations and maybe volunteerism. Is there anything you'd want to highlight that right now is top of the list in terms of what really could make a difference given all the projects you have and what's happening?
So we really want to put a learning center, a learning and employment center in one of the rooms at the convent. We have to furnish the entire convent and we have to staff it. We need transportation out of the convent. We'd like to make a beautiful meditation garden and a sort of a quiet space where people can go out. They have a beautiful courtyard. I could just see it now with the flowers and the grass and the umbrellas and the trees, So we have bedrooms. There's 9 bedrooms at the convent.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that a really top thing. But we also could use stuff like graphic design. We'd like to really bring our website to where it functions better for people to go to apply for different things. Yeah. So and however people want to help and support.
Right.
I know I'm willing to do all that I can do. But as I talked about shared safety, this is an opportunity to share in making safety and giving women like Ingrid a hand up,
Right.
where they can stand and know that their lives really matter and that we care about them and they're important, an important part of the community.
Right.
I don't know what I'd do without her.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure if there's, I'd open up to questions. If people have questions on any aspect of the inspirational stories, or if there are questions around, the criminal justice system or anything like that, please put them in the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll try and address some of those as well. I guess, as from my vantage point, as you think about the future and you're trying to scale it across the country, what is the challenge there, and how do you think about, the 16 safe houses that you're supporting across the country right now, and what materials might be useful? Because I know when you started in your book, it's quite clear that you had no guides posts whatsoever. You just started working it, and so
I just knew that those women getting off the bus downtown deserved and needed a chance. And I had a little house, and I went down and got and started picking them up when they got off the bus. Like, I wish somebody was waiting for me. But it's expanded to now. I have the Safe House Replication project going, where I'm supporting and helping people all over the nation to replicate our model. And I saw in the chat, Talk to Me Foundation, one of the places that is replicating in Indiana. They said they were donating. They was listening to Ingrid like crying. So, but they're one of the places that we are supporting to replicate.
Mhm.
So a new way of life's model needs to be all over the nation. And
Right.
when I went to those prisons and distributed those 18,000 books and sat down with women repeatedly, they said, I have nowhere to go when I leave. And I know that's real. I experienced that. So we are helping people to replicate all over the nation. And I also seen in the chat that Dick Heiser, so I have to call him out. When the pandemic hit, he called me up and says, I'm giving you $10,000 to start a new house. And I was like, okay, $10,000, that's fine, but that ain't gonna cover a whole house for a whole year. But
Right.
it was a start. And,
Mhm.
and I didn't blink. I took the 10,000, paid second and second, first and last rent, went and got furniture, and now the house is thriving. But
Right.
it's that type of stepping out and that type of risk. So I just want to say hi and thank you to Dick and thank you to Jenny.
So Susan, a few questions coming up here. One, which is, can we create a list maybe, and I can try and take that on and share it with everybody who registered, but maybe a list of things that you need from, things like tables, chairs, services, building a website, sort of, so that people could look at that, and then I can potentially, with my colleagues at Kearney, maybe be the gating, help collect those, and you and I can chat back and forth about that. So,
Yes.
so that's one thing we should try and do.
Okay.
A couple other quick comments that have come up here, which is, do you have any safe houses for women getting out of prison who live in the San Francisco Bay Area, or places that you'd recommend they would go to?
So I have a friend by the name of Kim Carter, who I mentored back 10 years ago. She's really taken off. She has a house in the Bay Area. So if you go to Time for Change, you can reach Kim Carter and find out where people are in the Bay Area. I would personally love to put a place in the Bay Area, a replication of the services there. But I haven't had anyone to replicate in San Francisco or
Yeah.
in the Bay Area. That's a big area.
We have a lady, Joanne Nelson, who says she wants to replicate the model in Vermont, Mercy Connections, the Vermont Women's Mentoring Program. So maybe there's a connection there.
Yeah.
In that.
Ask her to go to A New Way of Life's website,
Yeah.
anewwayoflife.org, and click down on SAFE. SAFE stands for Sisterhood Alliance for Freedom and Equality, and there she can fill out an application to be trained.
Okay.
And hopefully coronavirus will go away and we can have another training.
That was one of the questions, which was when was the next training that might take place? But I guess that to stay tuned to the website for any updates on that, assuming the pandemic sort of dissipates a little bit here.
Yes, yes. If we have your application for the SAFE training, when we get a date, we'll contact you well in advance for you to make arrangements to come down for the training. We've been really successful. So we're in, Illinois, Minnesota, I can't think about Arizona.
Yeah.
New York, yeah.
Two last questions, and then I want to hand to Sydney to close us out with some poetry. Any suggestions for a young man coming out of the system in Minnesota?
So I would say to contact Christian. Give me the name of the folks in Minnesota. What's the name of the agency?
We Rise.
We Rise. So there's an agency that's replicated in Minnesota called We Rise. So I would Google them and contact them for information locally.
Okay. And last question for tonight. From your personal experience is, if we have an opportunity to support policy changes in police reform, prison reform, what would be the highest priorities that, folks who might be involved in policy formulation that they should be putting on the table?
I would say shifting resources out of police budgets and into community solutions that are working, solutions that have been proven to work, so that communities can begin to get stronger and heal from all of the harmful and harsh policing that they've experienced. Yeah. Realignment, budget realignment.
Budget realignment.
Yes.
Sydney, I'd love to hand it to you now to offer us some poetry in this space, and then I will close out our session today, and we'll move on.
Before we go there, Michael, I just want to say thank you so much. I was so nervous coming into the conversation, and it's been such a delight and so beautiful to be here with you. And the hour just zipped by.
It did, didn't it?
It did. Thank you.
The worst time was our preparation time, wasn't it?
Yes.
Just the 20 minutes before, where we kind of didn't know what to do to say. Yeah. So, Sydney, please.
Sure. So, just one offering before we leave. Beautiful Undoings, number 3, June bugs. Trapped, thick, dark wings beating against the windowsill like electricity hitting the water on a storm's night. A lightning bolt whipping through moist, dark air. A catch in the heart, the faintest faint smile not quite forming around the mouth. Warm familiarity. Happy to oblige presence, acceptance of her role, that of service, to help. In this community of life and living. Different types of bodies now crammed into shared space. She wondered how long they had been coming here, to the eaves of this house. Every June, no later than early July, they brought their heavy, deeply colored bodies of pitch, soot, iridescent juniper, goldenrod, metallic forest, shiny clover, turtle, electric glow, fluorescent lime. Cotinus nitida, known also as the green June beetle or June bug. Now in her 3rd year on Hayworth, her body knew to wait for them, expect them. She listened out for June bugs. How long had they been in this flight pattern, this coming home, this nesting, this replenishment? Seeing them. Their beauty every June and July made more glorious with their recurring presence, watching their lethargic industry around the house and in the mulch beds, bulbous bodies of 3 sections of angles, bifurcated hardness of the upper shell clattering as their wings click and spread to open, their low, deep buzzing pushing through the summer air, anthropoda insects leaden by nature's design, crash and land with an audible pop. Skidding, they most often tumble over onto their backs. Cotinus nitida cannot turn over, cannot save themselves, die because of their bodies. Listening for them. Pop. She acknowledges her role, setting aloft June bugs, feeling the tickle of their spindly legs and mercury density of their bodies in the palm of her hand. She moves out the door, setting each one outside on the wide, thick expanse of an orchid leaf, or picks them up in front of the front door as she returns home from buying cat food or her workday. Often she opens her hand, feeling the tiny pinpricks of feet finding solid refuge. Green beetles stand, click open their wings, lean off the edge of her outstretched palm, and alight to freedom once again. Warm tears gather at her eyes. Her heart softens, opens and widens at witnessing their time to fly again. She knows her intervention in their ephemeral life cycle is but a stopgap to impermanence, one whose life is so short, precarious, so beautifully colored in an awkward and intriguing body that the gods have made. All beings, everywhere, without exception, deserve life, treated sensitively and sensibly. Using her own strength of direction, the mirror proximity of same existence, she picks up Cotitas nitida in her hand, offering refuge from a deep understanding of not being able to survive on one's own. She too, belonging to a corps d'esprit that circumscribes a sort of suffering through a brightly colored soma. Letting them go outside to fly again. She flies too.
She flying. Yeah.
That's a lovely poem, Sydney. And as you were reading it, there's lots of requests for actually people saying, please share that poem. So thank you for that. I offered my email if people want to connect on any donations outside, and I can help coordinate, and then with Susan, if that's necessary, obviously go straight to the website, New Way of Life as well, which may be easier, but I wanted to at least offer that. So my email is in the chat. I want to say Susan, Ingrid, Sydney, Kristen behind the scenes as well. It has been fabulous working with you in preparation for this, the shared anxiety of what we're going to do, and really the courage and inspiration that you provide, and what you do every day is truly remarkable, truly amazing. And on behalf, I'm sure, of so many people, I want to say thank you for that, and thank you for spending the time with myself and with everybody, helping us much better understand how the system and the way the world is currently working, and hopefully ways in which we can make a difference.
I want to take a moment to just thank Sydney, because she was the beginning architect that laid the foundation for this conversation. But beyond the conversation, her as a member on the team of A New Way of Life, has been such a blessing. And I'm so grateful to have her as a staff person, as a workmate, as a team member. I don't want to say staff person, as a team member, charging and leading the way and getting in wherever she can to make that difference. So thank you, Sydney.
Wow, thank you, Ms. Burton. Thank you so much. My pleasure.
All right.
All right, and thank everybody for joining tonight, and we really appreciated it all. So thank you again.
This was good. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.